Okay, so tonight's keynote panel is here to talk about trends in the craft beer industry. Non-alcoholic beers, low-alcohol alternatives, seltzers, and canned cocktails are growing in popularity. Here to make sense of it all, we have Jessie Higgins, Vice President and Team Lead of Specialty Sales at Toluna, Ashley Picerno, Marketing and Branding Manager at Crux Fermentation Project, and Brian Hughes, Director of Marketing at 10 Barrel Brewing. Let's hear it for our panelists.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I know that we're running a little behind, so we're going to keep this super efficient. But really excited to be here. This is my first EDCO event. I've lived in Bend for about 9 years. Born and raised Oregonian. Work in global market research, but I got my start here in this in Oregon in sensory and CPG research. So, keeping on that CPG trend, it's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm super excited today to have a couple of our thought leaders from the local craft bev-al space joining me here. And we're going to talk about some of the trends, what's happening in the industry. And while we're taking that lens that's really bev-al specific, I think it's really applicable to any type of product that consumers are purchasing, interacting with, making choices about. Our world is constantly changing. Consumers are expecting more. They want more from their products. They want a more individualized experience. So these trends are sticking around. We're going to talk about a couple big ones today, but I think very relevant to anyone in the CPG and product space. So we'll just get right into it. Of course, I had to bring some data, being from a market research firm. So I ran a survey a little earlier this month of about 1,100 people across the U.S., legal drinking age and up. We found 60% of those folks have consumed alcohol in the past 3 months. Of those, we found that our millennials, 68% of them had consumed alcohol in the last 3 months. On the opposite end of the spectrum, our Gen Z, only 52% in the last 3 months. Is that weird? Aren't younger people drinking more?
To me, it seems like the younger generations are a little bit more health conscious, maybe than our generation. I think we're probably all in the millennial generation up here. They're a little bit more mindful of what they're putting in their body. And there's also a lot more options out there. There's more non-alc options. In states like Oregon, psilocybin is legalized, cannabis has been legalized. So there's just a lot more legal choices that they can consume other than alcohol that also have less health effects. Also obviously depending on how you consume some of like cannabis and things like that. And there's a lot of research starting to bubble up just in the last month or so about cannabis and how you consume it and its impact on health and heart health. But I think to me it's really that there's more choices that less health effects and maybe more mental health, looking for more things that help mental health. And that's where I think especially psilocybin is starting to bubble up more and more with the younger audience of something that gives them maybe a little bit of a mental escape, but also maybe an opportunity for mental clarity without the hangover risk, the anxiety risk, which is something that you're seeing bubbling up a lot in social media now, talking about that anxiety you get when you're hungover, and just kind of eliminating some of those and a lot more choices out there. I don't know if, Brian, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head for sure. I would say on top of that, just the natural progression is that, it's not really cool to drink what your parents are drinking or do what your parents are doing, right? Like at the core of everything, I think the next generation's looking for what's new for them or what's unique for them. And so just like our, parents might have been drinking more of a, classic domestic, lager, you get to our generation and they're much more craft heavy. And then you get to this generation who's now we're seeing less craft, less IPAs, more of, RTDs. Force was up here presenting earlier with Ben, and that was pretty cool too. I mean, it's just that's kind of the direction they're going. Like they're looking for what's new, what's different, and so yeah, I think you nailed it. I think they're kind of finding their way in kind of their relationship with alcohol right now, which is pretty interesting to see because I don't think anybody knows kind of really what's happening next between the pandemic and just the different alcohols that are out there or the different drink options that are out there. I don't think anybody truly knows what's going to happen next. So it's an interesting time for sure.
Absolutely. And I know we all have seen the boom of non-alcoholic beverages beyond just, your water, your coffee, your seltzer water. There's a lot more choices out there when it comes to non-alcoholic beer, wine, spirits, RTDs like we saw earlier today. Interestingly enough, in that same survey, we found the biggest consumer group of the non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits is also millennials. So are millennials just drinking everything that's marketed towards them, or why do we think that maybe they're dipping their toe into that same space?
I think I would say that I feel like the pandemic we're seeing some residual effects from the pandemic, right? I think, we saw a lot more what we call pantry loading when, it was definitely something where during the pandemic, we saw more and more folks that were, there were concerns of what was happening. Obviously, I think people compensated by maybe drinking more than they normally would. I can speak for myself in that respect as well. And I think, right now we're getting a little bit back to normalcy post-pandemic. You're starting to see a little bit more of a realization of like, hey, I need to maybe relax a little bit on the level I was drinking before. And I'm seeing that amongst consumers and trends, obviously, but within my friends group as well, where you're starting to see, that rise of the sober curious movement, dry January, sober October, et cetera. And what's interesting is it's not even a full, black and white way of going about, their relationship to alcohol. It's more of like, hey, I'm going to use this to just help to not drink quite as much and make it so when I do drink, it's kind of that special occasion with friends and it's a little bit less of a habitual daily, routine.
I also think it might be as millennials were moving in out of that younger age, the partying, pre-family, and we're now a lot of us we have families. Hangovers affect you a little bit more once you hit about 30 or so. And, I know even for me, just some of the people that I follow on social media, you're seeing a lot more, parents, even especially dads, funny enough, that I follow a number of dad accounts that they're like, I've quit alcohol altogether, or I'm cutting back and I'm only drinking, beer on the weekends and I'm drinking non-alcs during the week so I can be more present with my kids. So to me, I in addition to the change after, everyone drinking quite a bit when we're all stuck in our homes, and kind of like, I think I need a break. I think there's also just, we're in a different space in our lives now. And, we all grew up in that, we all came of legal drinking age during the height of the craft beer movement, thinking about when I got my start in the industry in 2008 at, Craft Brew Alliance, Widmer Brothers, Red Hook up in Portland. There was a brewery. You could throw a rock at a brewery. You turn around and throw a rock in any direction and you'd hit a brewery. And that was just part of our culture and part of our 20s, and I think also is a part of, who we are at our core. And I think non-alcs are a way for our generation of being able to transition into drinking less, into that more parent-family mode, but still have something that feels like that and reminds you of that occasion. And like, I can still be that fun person, and I can still remember my 20s and going out and having a beer, but I can still have that beer but not compromise on my ability to be present for my family and in my life and not have a hangover tomorrow.
Absolutely. For both of you coming from companies that, were kind of at the forefront of the big IPA movement with millennials, how are you thinking about your strategy moving forward, knowing that there needs to be products for people that maybe aren't participating in that as much or as heavily? How does that affect your future planning?
So for Crux, Nomo we were on the forefront of the non-alc movement, and it is a huge part of our brand strategy going forward. For Crux, our Nomo lineup is now the #1 selling product for us in grocery retail, which is crazy to think of where things were, even 5 years ago and how much that's changed. And, being on the forefront of that and, being a brewery that's about innovative types of fermentation, Nomo's been a really great way for us to kind of shift and kind of still be there for our consumer demographic, just with a different way, in a different way. And we still have tons of IPAs on and all of that all the time, but we're seeing more lager drinkers. We're seeing more, I love a good lager. Bochi Bochi is like my favorite beer right now, even though I've drank a ton of IPA. Paul's drinking a Bochi Bochi. Even though, IPAs have once been king in my drinking habits too. And I see it across overall craft portfolio and what styles people are interested in. It's definitely pivoting away from more IPAs into lighter styles that people can appreciate the craft of. And then again, that that non-alc, and us having Nomo, and we're leaning heavily into Nomo the rest of this year as more of a lifestyle brand and something that fits into your life. So you don't have to stick out like a sore thumb when you're drinking it, but again, it just feels like another beer brand that you've got in your, in your fridge and in your your drinking portfolio at home. I think for us has been has been how Crux has been able to pivot and still capitalize on this, consumer, especially this millennial consumer that still loves beer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, for us, we also have an NA IPA as well, and we've definitely seen some success with it. But I think, we kind of took a little bit of a different tact with the trends in general, right? So I think seeing more moderation and the rise of non-alcoholic beer is definitely something that everyone's aware of. And I just saw something recently, and it's funny being up here and saying it, but I just saw an article that Deschutes has invested $5 million, I think, into a whole new brewing kind of operation that will help kind of go much bigger in the NA space. And so there's a lot of those breweries that are going that direction. And then you've got, the Athletics out there that are solely non-alcoholic and have done incredibly well in a short period of time. I think for us, one of the real difficult conversations that we had was, do we have the right to play in this space? We are a brewery for sure, and we can make an NA beverage, but we've also kind of, the way that our brand and what's been kind of core to our brand has been a little bit of a different, I don't want to say, more towards kind of younger parties, whatever, but it definitely felt like it wouldn't be quite as authentic for us to go big into the NA space. And so for us, that was an interesting trend that we definitely want to look at and keep watching and make sure that we have something for that consumer. But for us, we actually took a little bit of a different tact. And as I mentioned earlier, with this younger demographic, which is obviously all important as we continue to kind of look towards the future of our breweries, looking at how we can serve other trends within that consumer group. So, RTDs is definitely one of those areas that we're going into. But then also, another just kind of simple element that we've seen, one of the top factor for purchase is brand and strength of the brand. And so for us, what was most important was maintaining our brand integrity and maintaining our brand kind of position, and really doubling down. And we're seeing that younger demographic. I think the number that I saw was over half of the 24 to 34-year-olds say that the brand of beer that you drink says a lot about who you are. And so we take that seriously, and we want to make sure that that's kind of what we lead with. We're not just necessarily getting after trends that, again, maybe we don't have the right to play in quite as authentically.
And I think, like how Jessie teed up at the beginning, that even though we're talking about non-alc beer, kind of specifically in this is a great example of how our two brands are looking at the same exact data set and same exact demographic information, but taking that brand lens of what is right for my brand and tackling it in two different ways. We're both breweries from Bend. Our production breweries are right down the street from each other. We're two of the cornerstones where if someone comes to visit Bend, they're going to go to 10 Barrel, they're going to go to Crux. But we have different brand perspectives and different brand stories, and ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to make a decision of what's right for your brand to remain authentic and true to your consumer audience. So I think, kind of going back to, like I said, Jessie's point of, this, you can take this beyond that. And I think Broken Top, they also talked about it earlier, and how like they tried doing colorful branding and they were like, this just isn't us. Just because it's a trend does not mean you need to or that you should follow it. You really need to make sure it still is ultimately the right thing for who you are as a brand.
I think that's a really important point also to just hang on to as a brewery. We know like these younger generations, they have no brand loyalty at all. So saying like, your beer says something about who you are, the brand you drink, like hang on to that from an equity standpoint. Probably a lot of other local products as well. We talked a little bit about the health aspect of NA being a more popular option for consumers. We've had Dry January, Sober October. People have had the opportunity to kind of dip their toe into that lifestyle and see how they feel. Part of our survey was asking, why would you choose a non-alcoholic beverage over an alcoholic beverage amongst people that drink both? The number one reason across the board was 43% of people don't want a hangover, and that's totally fair. I was also surprised that was astoundingly the biggest reason for the youngest generation, the legal drinking Gen Z, who tend to be people that don't quite suffer the same from a hangover as some of the other, demographics. But then when we look at boomers and Gen X, I want to live that overall healthier lifestyle moving forward. And we talked a little bit about how you maintain that engagement with different consumer groups. From historically, we've looked at alcohol as eventually consumers sort of age out. They age in, they age out. How do you keep your brands relevant to all potential age groups?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think a big part is just trying to keep as much as we possibly can, kind of our ear to the ground on kind of what is resonating with them, what interests them. But again, like we were talking about, we have to be resolute in what our brand is and what positioning we occupy and kind of what we stand for. And then hope to kind of evolve that a little bit, little by little, not kind of a wholesale change, but little by little to kind of reflect some more of what interests the younger consumer. I think what's interesting right now is that a lot of craft breweries, I think, are a little bit lost at this time, which is unfortunate. And I'm not saying that it's an easy time whatsoever, but I mean, we're seeing, I think last year total U.S. craft was down 9%, almost 10%. And the 3-year, I think the 3-year CAGR for beer in general is like -7.5 or something like that. So I think everyone's kind of struggling to figure out how do you kind of keep up with these trends and how do you adjust. And there's some folks that got into this beer, industry and this craft industry because they're really passionate about craft beer and they're really passionate about what they do. And that's amazing, but it's definitely one of those times where it's a little bit of an innovate or die kind of situation, and you just have to pay attention to what these the younger generation is looking to, or how they're looking to engage with your brand, so that you can continue to stay relevant in everything that you're doing.
And you talked a little bit, Brian, about the post-pandemic, shift in where we're going. One thing we haven't talked a lot about is the ability for craft beer to have an on and off-premise presence. You go to the grocery store and you buy it, or you go to the pub and you have one. How do you engage all consumers across both those channels? How different are they? And how do you have to think about really getting that kind of mainstay and having that brand presence with your consumers through both channels?
This is a big challenge, and similar to in 2008 when we had the recession, we've definitely seen a huge shift in on-premise, so restaurant, going out and having beer, alcohol when you're out and about, and it's definitely shifting more to buying beer in the grocery store to pick it up to take it home. And there's probably a lot of things that have to do with this: the economy. You go out to eat. We have a family of 4. We have 2 little kids that are still eating off the kids menu, and it is hard to go out to eat and pay less than $75 for a meal, even going to the food cart pods. It's just really expensive. So I think more people are kind of cutting that out in the on-premise and shifting to buying, I can buy a 6-pack at the grocery store for only a few more bucks than you might be able to buy a pint, in a restaurant. And I think it's really important that brands consider those shifts as and where your consumer is drinking or using your product. So for us, we talk a lot about, like, for example, on our social media, we talk a lot about our pubs, but we're going to be shifting more to talking about how you could take a 6-pack of bochi and grab some sushi to go and have a picnic in the park for a much more affordable experience. And, being real about where your consumers drinking and using your product and meeting them there. I think consumers like it when they feel like they see you and you're helping to say, hey, we see that you're, picking up beer and you're drinking it at home. Here's some ways to engage in our brand at home. That's really important. And then whenever they are having, drinking beer, your product in on premise, or, like for us, both of our pubs are really important to us, that they see that continuity, they see that brand image, and then they can recognize it when they go to the grocery store or wherever they pick up their beer and be able to easily say, oh, that's that beer that I had when I was at their pub. I'm going to go now there's that 6-pack. I'm going to pick that up and take it home. So I think there's a few things that are really important. Meeting consumers where they are, being realistic about where they're purchasing, targeting and pivoting your marketing to match that consumer behavior, and then, trying to bring as much brand recognition from, on premise for us into when you go to buy your beer at store, and as much, that common thread and visual cues and things like that to me are really important in this changing landscape of on versus off-premise sales.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty key kind of change that we're all adjusting to, because I think the on-premise sales, especially bars, restaurants, et cetera, and seeing that number drop quite a bit, where it was upwards of 35% of kind of our sales were coming from on-premise, and now has dropped quite a bit. We were pretty reliant upon that as almost your kind of tasting, like product testing, product tasting, product trial, et cetera, which was great for us, because then hopefully the ideal scenario is they're drinking it, they're enjoying it, then they're going into the store, they're seeing it, and they're buying it. The fact that ratio is shifting so dramatically kind of definitely makes you have to kind of change and relook at how you're how you're approaching that consumer and kind of getting them to especially try what you're putting out. So I think it's kind of twofold. One, it's definitely emphasis on our pubs, and I think in the past pubs were almost treated as their own business, and I think we're really looking at it as like a critical brand touch point that we need to make sure that when people come in, it's the most pure form of what the brand represents, and if they're not leaving with a good impression of the brand, that's a significant issue. So I think that's one part. I would say the other part is how do you create something differentiated or exciting enough on shelf that when they do walk through the shelf, and I think we've all walked through the beer aisle, it's incredibly loud in terms of the the colors that you're seeing out there and the branding. So really trying to break through in that space is really difficult. But I think it's definitely what you're going to see in terms of like change of packaging and things like that maybe reflect some of those shifts as well.
Yeah, and I think not just saying this because Jessie's up here, but her and I have, like we were just talking, we've worked together since 2016 across so many brands and doing consumer research. And that is something that I cannot emphasize how important that investment is in being able to make sure that what you are putting out there, especially with packaging and how busy that beer aisle is, truly resonates with your target consumer. And you have a little bit of proof of packaging before you put out that major investment in packaging development, getting it out there. And it gives you a little bit of concept before that. You can tweak things if you get some feedback. To me, that's been, across every brand I've worked on, has been an incredibly valuable investment and tool to make sure that what you are putting out there in market is really hitting with your target consumer, and especially in the busy beer aisle, the fickleness and brand loyalty. Anything that you can do to kind of get a little bit ahead of that and a little bit smarter and sharper and analytical on something that is largely creative and subjective, to me is really important and is a huge help in just providing some confidence for you, your any accounts that you're selling to, your distributors, all of those things just kind of helps provide a little bit more confidence as you're kind of getting excited to push something new out there as well, that you got it. You're not just taking a risk, but you're taking a very calculated risk with some data behind it as well.
I didn't even pay her to say that, so. Thank you, Ashley. Last question, since we're winding down, thinking about trends and how you keep this, laser focus on what your consumers want, how they're changing, the trends that are happening in the industry. How do you keep a pulse on that? Any recommendations you would have for other maybe CPG or beyond CPG manufacturers here, what they can be doing besides some research on a day-to-day basis to just not lose that laser focus on their consumer?
I mean, I think I'm probably speaking to a lot of people in this room that are well-versed in research. I think simple things like just trying to keep tabs on industry reports or even just articles that are coming out with trends. I think there's a lot that's accessible there. But I think more so than that, and it sounds kind of funny probably, but is not overthinking, sample size and things like that. Like don't underestimate the value of talking with friends, with talking with, people at a restaurant, with just having general conversations and what kind of extra. I mean, don't put everything on that. Don't bet the mortgage on it. But I think it at least gives you a general sense of what's going on. Like I can't tell you how many times that. I'll look at these larger, Mintel reports or larger industry reports that cost a lot of money and have a lot of information that I think I could look at my friend group and say, yeah, it's pretty accurate, or myself even. So I think that's the thing is sometimes it's easy to overthink how many folks you need to make something, a solid, data piece that you can actually build off of. But I think just trusting, what you're seeing and what you're observing and then moving on that.
I totally agree with that. I think we can get bogged down in these giant sample sizes of validated quantitative data, which is great for telling you the what behind a story, but it doesn't tell you the why. So having those touch points with consumers directly, whether they're your friends or people you just run into at the pub, incredibly important to provide the color behind those consumer decisions.
Yeah, and kind of building on what Brian was saying, there are so many free, no matter what your industry is, there's a lot of free consumer insight report, newsletter type things that you can sign up for to get your hands on some of these bigger so whats from some of these bigger research companies. I know something that I am leveraging a ton is our, what we call Crux, our beer tenders. So while I'm marketing, we are ultimately, the voice of the consumer. We're advocates for the consumer, in connection with who we are as a brand. It's my beer tenders who are interacting with the consumers on a day-to-day basis. I ask them, what are they coming in and asking for that we don't have a product for? What are they saying about Bochi Bochi? What kind of consumer is buying this beer? Who's buying our draft cocktails? Who's buying Nomo? Those are the things that are really important. Even things like names. We've run names by them. Like, is this a name that someone would actually be willing to ask for? Sometimes they're like, I don't think anyone would know how to pronounce that, or they might be embarrassed to ask for that beer name. So I think, while we're marketers and we've, had the education and that's our job, not being afraid to go ask, other people in your organization who are the front lines with the consumer. There's a lot of insights to tell there because they talk to so many consumers every day. And that can also be having a conversation like with me. I've had a few conversations with some of the beer and wine stewards around town, and they'll give you great insights of like who's coming in, who's shopping in this category, who's shopping there. Relationship building with some of those key people that are engaging with consumers on a regular basis can really give you a ton of great insights.
Awesome. I think we're about at time, but I want to thank you both so much for being here and representing huge pillars of our beer community here in Bend. I'll turn it over to you.
This was great. Thank you all so much. And I love that you're actually looking at data, because we can have an idea about something, but unless you actually drill down into it, you don't really know. So, questions for these folks? Yes.
Do you see big differences in what people are looking for based on geography, like the Pacific Northwest, where those unique versus the Midwest?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you see big differences in what people are looking for based on region?
Oh yeah, so I've got a story about this. I developed, for a former brand I was on, I developed a hard seltzer. It was about 2018 after the White Claw. White Claw was coming out, and we were like, okay, we got to try a seltzer. And we were in Portland, and I started in quality assurance. And so I knew all of the brewers. This was right when I was pivoting over and starting to work on marketing. And all of the guys that I had worked with for years are like, Ashley, what are you doing? We're a brewery. Why are we making a hard seltzer? And I sat down with them at a table, and I showed them some data. And I was like, I know we all drink IPAs here. Pac Northwest is IPA heavy. Did you know that there's more hard seltzers sold in the total U.S. than there are IPAs? And all of their jaws dropped, and they're like, we get it. And I know, having worked on national brands, that can definitely be a big challenge, because if your production's in one spot, your marketing team's in one spot, it's really easy to get kind of myopic of like what's going on in your exact market. But you really need to bring your head up and see that people consume beer very differently across the U.S. I think even in California, like non-alcs are just kind of starting to be a thing where they're really big in the Pac Northwest. In beer in general, we tend to see trends start in the Pac Northwest and then radiate out, just because this is kind of where craft beer started. So like what you see coming up here is typically a good indicator of what you might see elsewhere in the U.S. in a few years, but definitely very different beer trends across the U.S. and how people consume alcohol and what they're looking for. And I think also, like we talked about earlier, the legalization of cannabis, psilocybin, some of these things in different states is also kind of probably changing those landscapes on a state-by-state level a little bit more than even 5-10 years ago, before that was kind of being legalized.
Yeah, I think that's where. I don't know. Okay, there it is. I think that's where the importance of data comes into, because it's not even what you'd imagine, right? So I mean, we don't do a lot of business in Arizona, but I know for a fact that one of the kind of leading styles in Arizona is like a Scotch red ale gross. So, like, I'm just saying, like, when it's super hot in Arizona, I would think, they're gonna have something light and something easy to drink, and they do have that, but that goes back to the data sets as well, and being like, okay, well, maybe I didn't know everything there is to know about the Arizona craft brew scene.
Yes, Arizona can surprise you. I know.
So is a 10-barrel Scottish red next beer that's coming out?
Nope, that is not going to be
Arizona.
authentic.
Okay, any other? Yes.
What are your thoughts around low-dose THC?
What are your thoughts around
Big fan.
low-dose THC?
Yeah, in beverage.
In beverage.
Like a soda
Like a soda that you could drink that has a little bit of pot in it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that. I think that's definitely something that's coming quick. We were talking about it backstage, and I think it's one of those things. I think right now in Minnesota, especially, it's a little bit wild right now, because it's kind of the wild, wild west with the loophole that they're all kind of taking on. So I don't know. I'm really interested to see what happens, and I know that even though I probably am not supposed to say this, our new parent company is probably excited about that opportunity as well. But yeah, I think it's coming for sure.
Cool. Yes. One more in the back.
talking data, and we're talking about delicious beverages that always feel big. How do you convert that from a quantitative to a qualitative, from a qualitative to a quantitative approach?
Okay. So tell me that question again. There's a lot of cans on that table. Who's doing with their beer? These guys. Yeah, okay. How do they like
What are your quantitative questions that turn the qualitative to quantitative?
Yes. I want it so bad. Okay. What are the quantitative questions to get to the qualitative result?
I think I'm
Do you got
maybe
it? I think
getting
it's
it.
you. Okay, yes.
So how do you take the qualitative analysis or what you're hearing and then validate it at a quantitative
Yes.
scale to
Thank
matter?
you, Jessie.
Yeah, okay. Through your qualitative, whether it's official or what you're hearing in the pubs, restaurants, etc., start developing hypotheses, testing them amongst other qualitative groups. From there, if that hypothesis becomes something that might have legs, you can functionally do it in the brewery, that's where we would recommend something like a concept or flavor test at a quantitative level to say, do people want this product? Is there intent to purchase? Is it unique? Is it relevant to that consumer? That will give you the numbers behind your quantitative test to say, yeah, this is a good idea.
And I'm going to go take a shot of that Manuka Mana for the brain. Okay, so I think I know we could keep talking about this, and I have so many questions for you. I want to like what you're excited about and all of this, but I do think we've covered quite a lot, and we're super grateful for your insights. So thank you, and I just want to encourage all of you to connect with these guys and ask them your questions, and come check in with us again.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, round of applause for our panel. Thanks, guys.